Against?
Aye.
Against B, please. Noted.
Thank you,
Because
Councillor.
of the duplication, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Noted. And I'll take that as carried with that addition. Right, now we move on to Kerbside Refuge Charging Policy Review, and I welcome Parul to introduce this item, and I know that we do have an amendment with this, but Parul, if you would like to introduce the item and cover that off and then put the recommendations up, that would be helpful. Thank you.
Kia ora tātou, ko Parul Takuingwa. So really good to be here. The paper before you summarizes the results of broad and deep analysis of the options for funding Auckland Council's curbside rubbish collection service. So I've just got a bit of a brief background into where this is coming from, and then I will hand it over to Sarah to talk a little bit more in detail in terms of what the findings were. So just a little bit of that, and then we'll take questions. As you would notice that there are two attachments to the report, a summary of findings by consultants Morrison Lowe and also the local board feedback in full. As I said, we'll take the paper as read, and then we will take any questions following that. As you have heard me say this before, Auckland Council plays a significant role, or Auckland plays a significant role in influencing domestic waste reduction. All the domestic waste only accounts for a small percentage of the Auckland's waste streams, with the potential to be collecting refuse, recycling, food scraps. But it is 1/3 of that residential collections that happens across the nation. So what we do here in Auckland does have an impact on what happens across the country as well. So our Auckland's waste management and minimization plan that we adopted in 2018, as you would remember, sets out the zero waste vision for Tanuki Makaurau. And we've got a lot of actions in there to achieve it. But what we're talking about today is relating to the household waste and how do we tackle the household waste that we are producing and sending to landfill. So the plan talks about the introduction of a region-wide 3-bin collection system. It's got a bin for refuse, recycling, and food scraps. And the way it is set out with the frequency and the size of the bins is to enable maximum diversion from landfill. And as you would remember, the intention in the current waste plan is to implement a region-wide pay-as-you-throw charging system for rubbish collections. When we amalgamated in 2010, you would remember that the way we did rubbish recycling services have been different. And I guess we're still struggling to get refuse across the line. All the recycling and inorganics and some of the other services that we've had have been made standardized. But it is time to get our last collection service, which is around rubbish, standardized as well. So just to recap in terms of what we have now, Legacy, Manukau, and Auckland is on a rates-funded service, and the rest of the region has a user-pays model. In the first plan, we've given the commitment to Aucklanders that we will standardize the service across the region and the way we charge for it as well. Because we believe standardizing the service is more equitable, so that everybody has the same service and the same cost. And it is also much easier for us to actually communicate what are we talking about when we talk about our services. Progressive changes have been introduced over the past decade to standardize the service. However, the charging mechanism is still remaining to be done. So here we are wanting to look at how do we do that. And before we were to move to a completely pay-as-you-throw for the region, we wanted to look at the evidence to see whether it was telling us the same what it was when we did the 2018 plan in terms of waste minimization and the link to waste minimization and the way people paid for the service. That instigated the work behind what you see in your paper today. So this brings to you the evidence of what that work is telling us. And it is also requesting that we go out to Aucklanders to ask them, or get their view on our proposal to move the entire Auckland region to a rates-funded model for their rubbish collections. So from here, I'll just pass on to Sarah just to talk us through a little more detail in terms of what those findings were, what the options were that we considered, and also just to touch briefly on the local board feedback. Sarah?
Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Madam Chair, Mayor and elected members, e mihi ana ki ngā mana whenua huri noa a Tamaki Makaurau ko Sarah Leclerc toko ingoa. Nō reira, tēnā koutou katoa. So I'm just going to go briefly through. We focused on our comparative analysis on consideration of what we believe a domestic curbside waste collection service needs to provide, which is a service that's both easy to use and encourages households to do the right thing to minimise their waste, that meets our commitments regionally, nationally and internationally to reduce our emissions, that provides the best value for money for all our customers and is financially resilient for council to deliver. And we also need to ensure that the chosen options means that everyone has access to a fair and affordable service, regardless of where they live or their income level. So in terms of the options considered, we compared 3 options: the region-wide pay-as-you-throw, which is our current policy direction, a region-wide rates funded, and the continuation of the current hybrid model to identify which option best delivers the outcomes that we're seeking for Auckland. Our preferred option, as presented in the recommendation to the committee, is to consult with the public to amend the current waste plan to enable a move to a region-wide rates-funded refuse collection service with a choice of 3 bins to accommodate different household needs. Our review shows that a rates-funded service enables council to achieve the best waste minimisation outcomes, as it provides the most influence over the region's domestic waste stream, is the most cost-effective, lowest risk and most financially resilient for council to deliver due to economies of scale. It provides Auckland Council with the greatest opportunity to respond to the climate emergency and meet the commitments set out in Te Tarakea Tāwhare, Auckland's climate plan, by reducing and mitigating emissions and retaining the flexibility to adapt to climate impacts into the future. And it delivers the greatest certainty for Aucklanders by enabling Auckland Council to provide a universally available, equitably priced service across the region, regardless of location or income. So under this option, households in legacy Manukau and Auckland City area would continue to pay for their refuse collection through their waste targeted rate, and households in current PAYT areas would no longer be required to buy tags and would shift to paying through a targeted rate via a staged implementation. And although these rates would not come into effect until 2024-25, operational lead times require certainty of decision making well in advance of that time, which is why we're bringing this recommendation to you now within this budget period. In terms of other options that we considered, we did consider the region-wide PAYT model. That's the current policy direction within the waste plan. This would involve shifting legacy Auckland City and Manukau City households to a pay-as-you-throw charging model. Our review concluded that this option is less favourable. It has not resulted in lower refuse volumes as in comparable areas of Auckland. And refuse markets in New Zealand operate very differently to those overseas, which affects the way we can deliver services due to the side-by-side competitive nature of our refuse market. PAYT is estimated to be more expensive, both for council and for Auckland overall, and PAYT comes with higher financial risks for council. We also looked at maintaining the current hybrid model. As noted in the report, this option was excluded from the final analysis as it was felt that it would merely perpetuate the perceived and actual inequities of variable services across the region. It would prevent council from reducing the cost of delivery by spreading the cost across the greatest number of customers, and it would continue the requirement to operate and communicate about 2 different charging models with customers. So I just wanted to briefly come on to the local board feedback. I noted that Councillors Henderson and Councillor Hill's questions under item 8 on the agenda about feedback from local boards, so just to provide some clarity on that. The project team asked local boards to provide an indication of their preference between a region-wide PAYT, region-wide rates funded or hybrid model. We mapped the feedback we received from local boards, business meetings from their September business meetings, and the full report is provided at attachment B to the committee report, and is also mapped as figure 6 in the main report. Currently, there are 11 local board areas with refuse services paid through the rates. That's 55% of the population. 8 local boards where households who are council customers pay using the PAYT tags or WAGs in some areas. And there's 1 local board, FO, which has a combination of both, and 1 Rodney, where we currently provide no refuse collection services. So in terms of responses indicated so far, 10 out of the 11 local boards already on a rates funded system would like to stay rates funded. Two of those advocated for the hybrid model to continue, and one, that's Mangakiki Tamaki, expressed no preference at this time. 3 of the 8 PAYT local board areas who would like to stay on PAYT, with 1 Devonport Takapuna advocating for the hybrid model to remain. 1 PAYT local board, that's Upper Harbour, felt they did not yet have enough detail to express a preference at this time. And 3 of the current PAYT local boards, that's Franklin, Henderson Massey and Kapatiki, indicated they would like to move from a PAYT service to a rates funded model. And FO, which has both models, would like to move to full PAYT. So that concludes my presentation, and we're happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Parul and Sarah. I note that there is a new B, which I accepted as chair of this committee, but I do note that Councillor Hills and Councillor Cashmore want to move in second. I'm going to invite Councillor Sayers just to talk to that, and then I will come back to you, Parul, for your comments, which I understand you're in support of his recommendation, but I just think by way of order and clarification, I'll go to Councillor Sayers first and then come back to you. Is that all right? Then I'll open for questions. So Councillor Sayers, the floor's yours.
Oh, thank you very much, Madam Chair. Thank you very much for accepting B as into your own recommendations rather than having to go through the amendment process. And I think that was because of the cooperation over the last 24 hours between yourself, your staff, Parul and the rest of the Waste Solutions team.
You didn't do it at the 9th hour, that's why.
No, at the
the learning there, Councillor.
Yeah, well, I didn't think of the other one until this morning. So, look, the messaging there is the reason why I raised it was because reading through the paper, I didn't think it was just quite clear enough, Madam Chair. So when it comes to the question, I've got another couple of clarification questions, but it was really about adding a bit of clarity for the direction that this committee's giving to Parul and the other council team. So thank you, Parul, and thank you, Madam Chair. And that's the reason why B's in there. And I'm glad that Councillor Hills and the Deputy supported as well. So thank you, Madam Chair. That's all I've got to say on the matter.
Thank you. And Parul, I think just for efficiency's sake, I should ask that Councillor Sayers' comments are correct from your perspective. You're happy. Is that correct?
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair, we are happy with the suggestion there, and we will make sure that the consultation material reflects what is mentioned in the recommendation.
Right, thank you. Questions then, councillors?
I did have a couple, Madam Chair.
Yep.
Is that right? Just if I can carry on.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you very much. Again, Parul, they're just clarification questions. The first one, just it may be Sarah that wants to answer this. Just sparked off what from the presentation, and it's really on behalf of those other local boards. So some of them wanted to keep the hybrid. Right? So my understanding is either one or the other. The hybrid's out completely. So just so the correct messaging goes back to those local boards. If we wanted to look at the hybrid today, theoretically, I'm not saying that I want to do that, but theoretically, that's not a possibility today. Is that correct? We've already resolved on that in an earlier decision-making process. That's the first one. Thanks, Paul.
You, Madam Chair, yes, that is right. As per the waste plan that we've had since 2012, then in 2018, the intention is to move the entire Auckland region to standardized services. And I think we've heard quite a bit of that back from some of the boards in terms of, confusion, in terms of saying who's got what. We don't understand how we pay for waste, especially when you're paying it through rates. And some complain about, why am I buying a tag? So I think it's that confusion that exists because of the mixed way we are, and wanting to say that we are one city now, why don't we have this sorted? So I think there's a clear mandate there to actually go with one or the other, rather than continuing as we are.
Thank you very much. And the second question is, supposing the feedback comes back and overwhelmingly, they want to stay with the current pay-as-you-throw system, if that was retained, would that include both the bags and the bins as options in the pay-as-you-throw model, if that was a regional-wide adoption?
based on the feedback and what you decide as a committee, as a governing body in terms of the way forward, if it was a pay as you throw, what we have in the plan is to go for bins and the bag option for rural areas. So that does not change immaterial of whether we go for rates funded or a pay as you throw model. So the reason why we've got bags in certain parts of the region is from a health and safety perspective, because of the terrain and the way households are placed, because we do have bag options for central CBD at the moment as well. So that is a very different issue in terms of why do we have bags in some areas. That service level would be retained, immaterial of how we pay for it.
Thank you very much for those answers. Paul, could I ask a favour just off that? Is there a map that would show, and that theoretically pays to throw regional-wide options, that shows what those rural catchments are? I'm just interested to know if, like, Snell's Beach, Alges Bay, Warkworth and other areas just in the Rodney ward are, who's in what basket. Is that possible? Do you have such a map? Yeah, okay. Okay, thank you, Paul. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Second question is from Councillor Henderson, Deputy Chair.
Thank you. Just a quick question. Does changing from PAYT to a rates-funded model sort of shift the rubbish payment from landlords to renters to landlords, thereby creating a little bit of relief in a tough time for renters through COVID?
Sarah?
Sorry, I'm just finding my mute button. I should be adept to that by now. Through the chair, yes, that would shift that that cost from renters to landlords. Clearly, we don't determine how landlords charge renters, but that the cost would be through the rates. Yes.
Cool. Thank you.
Right. Any further questions?
Further question, Madam Chair?
Yes, Councillor Walker. Question from you.
I did indicate that in the chat bar.
Yes.
Just to confirm, with the waste bins, we're going to have the three sizes, 240, 120 and 80. And in similar fashion, will we also have three rating costs attached to those? So a different figure for the 240, the 120 and the 80. That's the case?
Through you, Madam Chair, yes, it is.
Okay, that's great, Madam Chair. And I did indicate an amendment that I'd like to speak to just when you're ready.
Thank you, Councillor, and staff have given their advice on that amendment and emailed you if you could check that while I take further questions. Thank you. Councillor Hills, a question from you.
Thanks, Madam Chair. And just in explaining this to others, and I actually can't find it in the detail, but I think it is there. What is the projection of the tag price going up over the next couple of years? I know it ends up being quite dramatic from what people are paying now for a 120 litre bin. So I just want that on the record because I have been a supporter of the tags, but yeah.
So Parul, shall I answer that one? Yeah, so through the chair, with the financial advice that we provided last week is that tag sort of for a like-for-like price between now and for in 2024, so when our modelling starts, the price would, taking into account inflation and taking into account the waste levy, the tag price for a 120 litre bin we anticipate would be at around $5.10.
Thank you. And there's probably an assumption that it'll continue to rise if we kept the PAYT in place.
It would, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any more questions? Right, Councillor Walker, do you want to put up your amendment and make it part of the substantive or go for something different?
I've said yes to the officers, Madam Chair, so if that works, that's fine.
Right, thank you. Could we please have the amendment up on the screen that Councillor Walker has, which has been amended slightly by staff, and they're happy with that. While we're preparing it, I'm happy to call it out. Have you got it, Sandra?
Madam Chair, Sandra will just be finalising that. It's on the screen now.
Oh, there we go. The amendment is that officers prepare budget advice on the costs, including carbon accounting, for the implementation of incentives for homes and businesses to deal with food scraps in on-site property systems, such as worm farms, as a complementary measure to the food scrap collection program. Do you want to talk to that, Councillor?
Yes, please, if I'm able to, Madam Chair, that'd be marvellous. And this is entirely positive. So we're going out with a food scraps collection, and that will in part deal with the lowest common denominator, which are those people that may not want to make the behavioural change to process the food scraps on their own homes, which is what I do. There have been numerous submissions to the waste plan and also comments from local boards that the people that process the food scraps on site using things like a hungry bin are actually doing the best thing. It's the best thing in terms of the cost to council, because it doesn't cost the council. It's the best thing in terms of emissions, because you don't have the transport emissions and so on, and all of the things associated with food scraps. It's completely resilient, because if there is a hiccup with the council's scheme, all of these people are self-sufficient. It's marvellous in terms of behavioural change, because it is the best form of behavioural change that you can have, which is people taking responsibility for their own waste directly and producing a product that they can use for growing their vegetables and plants at home, because the end product is a slow release fertiliser and liquid fertiliser that is perfect for growing plants. It's the best there is. And I think I emphasised from a carbon perspective, it is by far and away the best perspective. So what I'm looking to, Madam Chair, is to have some information that we can go out with so that we can actually incentivise this. And what I mean by that is it may be, for example, that we could make various bins available to people at a discounted price that may not even necessarily cost us any money, but provide a carrot to people to do the right thing. Because as you know, Madam Chair, if somebody offers you a cup of coffee, a free cup of coffee, and you need to do a little something for it, your eyes will light up. And you'll think to yourself, gee, I'm going to go for that, simply because there's an incentive. And the way that climate change is working, and the most effective schemes, are we are actually incentivising behaviour rather than not. And that's the change that we want. So that's the methodology and the reasoning behind the simple bolt-on. I'm certain that the officers will be able to accumulate the information very easily. I can see that Paul's probably already onto it, and we'll have it for the process going forward. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor, and I can tell you I could do with a very strong cup of coffee now. So,
well, I'd give you one if I was in the vicinity, Madam Chair, but I'm afraid I can't.
If I may,
okay.
Through you, Madam Chair,
yes.
If I may just respond to that. What Councillor Walker is talking about is a comprehensive program in terms of looking at reduction, on-site composting and our collections program, which is something that we undertake already. What we are looking to do by doing some extra work is to make sure that we are looking at the carbon accounting side of things and what further incentives can we provide to residents to actually deal to their organics on their property. I do not believe this needs to go out for consultation as part of this annual budget process, because it will not be possible to get that information ready in that period of time. However, what we can do is prepare the information and come back to an Environment and Climate Change Committee and talk through what we are endeavouring to do and look at the waste levy money that comes in, which is going to come in at an increased amount in the next following months, and see how we could utilize some of that to do this program if it is approved through the ECC committee. So my recommendation here would be we definitely do undertake this work, because it is worth doing behavior change in this area, and we could look at reallocating some of that money up the chain in terms of behavior change in conjunction with our collection service as well. So reporting back to ECC in next year and looking at what that budget and what that work program looks like would be my recommendation.
Right, thank you, Parul. I really appreciate that. Any other questions on the recommendation, sorry, on the amendment? Any questions? No comment from Councillor Cooper.
Madam Chair, I mean, I support this work, but I don't know whether this is the right place for it. I think it should come to Environment and Climate Change or as be part of a feedback, because we know that council through the local boards already fund places like organisations such as Eco Matters, Kaipariki project, and I'm sure my fellow councillors down south will tell me the organisations there that do all this work, giving, you know, composting, worm farming projects, workshops. They work with their local bids, they work with businesses all the time. So we're already doing this work. I'm interested in the carbon accounting, but I don't really want to have our staff using that time out of the work program to be going away and doing a whole lot of projects that are encouraging people when we're already funding other organisations who do that much better than we do and are set up to do that. So that's why I can't support this in its current form. It's another duplication. Great ideas, but they're coming at this last minute with nothing behind them, and basically demanding that we have all this sort of stuff ready by February when we go out to consultation. Well, we're signing this off today. You know, and I don't expect our staff to be working over the holidays to do this, because that's what it will mean. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. And yes, you make a very good point about the 9th hour, but I think I accept the words of Parul with what she wanted to do, with what she was happy about, and she's happy to work her out in this time. Potentially this is not the right committee, and if I had more notice rather than on the day, we probably would have dealt with that with the councillors, but it is very hard to chair and do all this and keep my eye on all these amendments coming through by email. So I'm happy to leave it.
I'm not criticising you, Madam Chair. You're doing a fabulous job.
Thank you. So I'm happy to leave it as it is if the mover and seconder are happy about that. But I have a comment from Councillor Cashmore.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just backing up Councillor Cooper, she's absolutely right. Several local boards do this work already with council support about different programs that are focused on local areas. It's a far more appropriate measure. I think Parul's well aware of that work, and also support Parul just doing a summary of this and coming back to ECC. I don't think it should be part of any consultation at all, so I will not be supporting D. Please note that. Right.
Thank you. I think a suggestion has been that we add to the end of this to be reported back to a future meeting of ECC in 22-23. That came from Finance. Can you just send that through Finance to Sandra, please, so we can put it up? And Councillor Walker.
Confused, Madam Chair. Sorry, is this an amendment or is this your chair's? Because it's got an amendment here. So
I'm
are
not
you adding?
Actually, but Finance have suggested that we ask for this to be reported back to ECC, and I'm happy to do that because it's really not a finance issue.
Madam Chair, the mover and seconder need to agree to that change.
Are you happy with that, Councillor Walker and Councillor Watson? This work is not finance work. It is work that should come through the Environment and Climate Change Committee. Are you happy about that?
Yeah, I don't mind who it comes back to as long as it comes back. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
I just would like to see the work done as soon as possible because, as I've said, we're not going to affect change otherwise.
And you could take the word budget out, 1, 2, 3, 4, fifth word, but it's still advice, which because budget and costs are the same. So to prepare advice on the costs, right?
Sure. Okay.
All right. Okay. I need to ask the mover and the seconder if they're happy to absorb it into the substantive, so we don't do it by way of a separate amendment. It can be by way of addition. Councillor Hills, yep. Councillor Catsmore.
Chair, I'm happy now that it's been slightly changed because we, as you say, that we already do this. I mean, the Compost Collective, we're partners with 30,000 people are already involved with that. But it doesn't have anything to do with this consultation. But if it's about reporting back, even if it was just reporting back on all the things we do, because nearly everything in there we are already doing. But I'm happy to support it as part of the overall if the Deputy Mayor is now happy that it's not part of this current consultation.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor.
Deputy Mayor's never happy, but he'll agree.
Thank you. No further comments. I will then take it to the vote. It has been moved and seconded and is now 4 recommendations. All those in favour say aye.
Sorry, Chair.
Sorry.
Sorry.
Aye.
Chair. Is this on the substantive or the amendment?
It is substantive. I asked whether the mover and seconder would take it into the substantive.
Okay, I'd like to comment on the substantive when ready. Cool, thanks.
Right, comment on the substantive. Councillor?
Cool, thanks. Sorry to hold everyone up. Yeah, look, I just wanted to really briefly thank the officers because actually this is a really huge move in the city. And I think after a long day, we should still acknowledge that, you know, after over 10 years of different systems, we're actually doing this really difficult thing. And it will actually be a really controversial thing, especially in areas which have PAYT. I wanted to kind of briefly mihi to the local boards as well for taking a really thoughtful and considered approach to this, because, and in particular those that have looked at their situation and said, no, actually we want to try a different system, because that actually takes a bit of courage and a bit of guts, because communities, as you'll know, are very passionate about this kind of issue. I did a bit of a straw poll when I was going around before COVID. In particular, we had public meetings, which was really cool in my ward, and some very passionate views and some very split views. But I do need to sort of put my head up as well and say, look, personally, at this point, I favour the rates system. People are getting sick of bin tag theft, sick of forgetting to buy them in the first place, and want a simpler system. And also, just to explain my question earlier, that the rates funded model really helps renting families and young people with just that little bit extra in their budget at a tough time. And, you know, take it from me, families can really produce waste at a much higher level than single people. And those families that are renting could really use a little help at this time. All of this would be a small price to pay if it proved to actually reduce waste, but evidence is showing that's not really the case. But despite all this, there is a status quo bias in whichever community you represent. For many people that know the PAYT system, they do want to keep with what they know, so I respect that. So despite the personal views that I have, I'm really firmly committed to listening closely to the residents on this, and we'll take their guidance next year on what they sort of want me to do and how they want me to vote. And I just really look forward to hearing from them and having a debate that'll actually get quite passionate. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Deputy Chair. Councillor Newman, I will put you next, and I'll leave the final comment to the mover and the chair of the ECC committee, Councillor Hills. So, Councillor Newman, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you, Chair. I'm sorry I had to step out for a short time, but firstly, can I acknowledge Pearl and the officers? It's been an interesting debate through the years now, Pearl, hasn't it, about the delivery of waste services and choice and options and methods and methodologies. And it really started in Papakura because, of course, Papakura was the first area of Auckland into the food scraps scheme, which, of course, is rate funded. And Papakura, which has long had its pay-as-you-throw based on the orange rubbish bags. I'd made a commitment to people in Papakura some years ago that I wanted to end those orange rubbish bags and get them into the wheelie bins, and we got them into the wheelie bins. My view, Chair, is, I think this is a great thing to consult on. My expectation is that, notwithstanding the Papakura local board's preference for pay-as-you-throw, the rate-funded scheme, I think, is better value for money, and 2, it's infinitely more convenient than having to run out and going down to the dairy and buying tags. And so my view is that it's a good conversation to have, and I believe that the ratepayers in my ward and that part of the ward will actually they'll accept the proposition that a rate-based scheme is better than pay-as-you-throw for the convenience of it. I did want to flag, and it won't be a surprise to Pearl, my extreme caution about any move from weekly to fortnightly. I know that that's not being canvassed here. No. It is in the report as something that we could look at in 2024. Chair, I don't know where I'll be in 2024, but one thing's for sure, I don't think I'll be moving too much from my current position, which is that the benefit of the weekly rubbish collection service is that those who wish to have that service each week can put their wheelie bin out, and those who do not need it or do not wish to put their wheelie bin out this week don't have to. It's called choice for the household, and I'd sooner that the households have that choice as opposed to that choice being taken away on a proposition that it's better for the world if they only have that option fortnightly. So thank you to the officers for the analysis that's gone into this, and thank you to colleagues for your consideration of the options, but I'm certainly very enthusiastic about consulting on the proposition of moving to a consolidated rate-based scheme across the Isthmus and in South Auckland as well, and Papakura and the like. And I would hope that as we can bed the option, if that's endorsed next year, that we can just hopefully put this debate around this weekly versus fortnightly where it needs to be on the shelf, and just move ahead with an option which provides maximum choice for households. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Just one correction, that fortnightly or weekly isn't until 2025 or 26, not 24, but it's...
Well, I need to consult on the discussion. We'll only have a discussion about that prior to.
Yeah, I'm sure you'll be sitting around the table potentially. So final comment now to Councillor Hills.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to Parul and Sarah for this, and team for this massive amount of work. It's been significant and a significant process too. And I think when you first came to me around standardising to rates after I'd spent many an hour replying to people about how great the tag system was, when there was a lot of opposition there around the tag system change. But I have preferred the tag system, but I think that was because we moved from bags which were often ripped open, left all over the berm. You had to, it's much more difficult and unsafe for our workers as well. So the change to a bin and tag wasn't a huge difference because we've never had a rate funded model on the shore. But our recycle is rates funded, our food scraps will be to remove those 100,000 tonnes of food waste eventually. That will be rate funded. So it does make sense to move this way, especially when you start talking to people about, as Councillor Newman was saying, running down to the dairy. The dairy generally charge a little bit more for the tags, even though they're not supposed to, but they often do. And with those tag prices kind of rapidly going up and the cost to everyone being far more expensive if we don't move to rates funded. So I'm one for evidence and stats, and you've provided lots and lots of those for us. So just as long as we get the communications right to the community, understand when it rolls out, when the changes happen, and how they can go down to a small bin or up to a big bin. I think there will be concern from some smaller households, maybe single or couples may be retired. Those people who are retired who may think that it's a bad move, but they can choose that that smaller bin, and hopefully that's a seamless process too. So this is going up for consultation, obviously, but we're showing our hand by saying that the rates funded makes the most sense for our city. And I think after 10 years, well, no, longer than that, 11 years, the community are saying, why do we all have different ways of doing rubbish? Often people will say to me, hey, I hear the city and South get free rubbish. How come we have to pay for tags? And then I have to explain, no, it's not free, it's in the rates. But I think it does make sense after all this time to be moving to a standardised model across the city, and we will see what the community says. So thank you, Chair, and thank you, staff.
Thank you, and thank you, Parul and Sarah, very much. I will take this to the vote now. It's been moved by Councillor Hills and seconded by the Deputy Mayor. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against? That'll be a unanimous vote. Thank you very much. Committee members, we've got 2 large substantive items and we've still got governing body to go. If it's all right with you, I'd like to try and box on, and hopefully you can take a 5-minute break and still listen. So we're now into item 13, other rates and fees, and I welcome Andrew Duncan, Manager of Financial